You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program, Mom. Zev Brenner. With us right now is Rabbi Yeruchim Silber, Director of New York Government Relations of Agudath of America, Rabbi Yehoshua Pincus, the Director of Yeshiva Services of Agudath of America, and we're looking at some things that are happening in New York State that may change yeshiva education for Jewish students in New York. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us, Zev.
Sure.
Thank you for having us on.
I know we've discussed this various times, and the yeshiva system in New York is under challenge for New York State because they believe that there's not enough English and science being taught, so therefore they want to regulate what's being taught in yeshivas. It's been going back and forth for a number of years, but from what I understand right now, there's something happening which may change the dynamics where New York State will be able to be involved in the curriculum of yeshivas. So what's happening? Let me start with you, Rabbi Silver.
So let me give you a brief history. This back about 2015, almost about 7 years ago, group of people who went to yeshiva, I call them anti-yeshiva agitators, who had been in yeshiva and for whatever reason they felt they weren't successful. They just began a crusade against yeshivas across New York State and wrote a letter to the Department of Education, New York City Department of Education, alleging that 39 schools do not teach proper secular studies or are not substantial equivalent to public schools. As it turned out, there were actually 28. One was a butcher shop, but be that as it may, an investigation began, and one thing led to the next. But in 2018, the former commissioner of New York State Department Education Department, SED, her name is Miriam Ilya, who's no longer there, issued what she called guidelines for substantial equivalency. Those guidelines were a rigid checklist of how many courses, how many hours are required for each course. It was something that would have required yeshivas to have up to 5-6 hours a day of secular studies, which almost no school has, even from the. And at that time, it was challenged in court, and it was thrown out of court basically on a technicality because it didn't go along with the State Administrative Procedure Act, which requires a comment period. It was called regulations, not guidelines, and every regulation requires to be put on the state register, have a comment period. So then right before in June 2019, they came back with virtually the same guidelines as regulations with a comment period that ran from basically over the summer of 2019, July and August. It generated 140,000 comments, unprecedented.
Wow, unbelievable.
Yeah, and the vast majority were in opposition. They realized that wasn't going to stand. A few months later, this in February 2020, New York Puerto Region decided to re-engage with stakeholders. Now it got, COVID happened a month later, so it got kind of pushed back. But in the fall of 2020, I guess, they came back and they had a series of engagements, meetings, primarily over Zoom with different stakeholders. And based on that, they did come up with new regulations, which were issued just a couple of months ago in March. And with a 60-day comment period that began April 1st, which goes till the end of this month. This I'll turn to Rabbi Pincus to kind of summarize what the new regulations are, why they're troubling. Now, I will say in some ways, some respects, they're an improvement over the 2019 ones, because 2019s were really a non-starter. It was just not a single yeshiva or day school in New York State would have been able to comply. The ones now are somewhat improved, but still very troubling.
So, Pincus, so what is it about it that you don't like?
There are several aspects of the regulations that are troubling. First of all, in general, most of us feel that the schools that are not regulated by the government do a lot better job of educating the schools that are regulated. And we have, Baruch Hashem, an extremely successful track record of building thriving Jewish and economically successful and politically engaged communities. And don't mess with what works. Don't fix it if it ain't broke. So that's, first of all, is we feel that the government should not be involved in regulating our schools. If you want to be involved in health and safety matters, you want to make sure there's fire drills and proper inspections, that's fine. But in terms of education, stay out of our schools. That's our number one message. Now, in terms of the specifics of the regulations, as Rabbi Silber mentioned, there are a number of improvements which would help some yeshivas comply with regulations, but there are a lot of problems for a lot of yeshivas.
So now tell us exactly what is it that they're looking to do that the yeshivas are upset about?
So what they call is multiple pathways. That's really what it comes across. One, the three primary pathways are: one is registration, registered high school, which means a school that gives regents. In order for a high school to give UFA regents, need to be called registered high school. So any elementary school some of them are, especially the Brooklyn ones, many schools are K to 12. So any yeshiva that's attached to a registered high school, that's called equivalent. That's one pathway. The other pathway is accreditation. To get accreditation, which we'll get to what this could be troubling as well. It's not as simple as it sounds. The school gets accreditation from an accrediting body. That's called equivalent. And the third thing that we're dealing with is by taking state assessment, taking certain tests and showing improvement in the assessments. Those are the actual pathways or the others, but those are the primary pathways that most schools will use to deem that they're equivalent.
So what's the problem with that as far as yeshivas are concerned?
So to speak to those three pathways, pathway number one is the registration. There are many very fine elementary schools that provide an outstanding education, but are not connected to a high school, and they would have a problem. That would not work. The registration path would not work for them.
So it's not something which is just only for yeshivas. This goes to a whole bunch of schools.
Absolutely, right, absolutely. No, this is the problems in the regulations are concerns that are shared by our colleagues in the general non-public school community, the Catholics, independent, the other religious schools as well. They share most of the same concerns. So one concern is that either schools that choose not to register for whatever reason, or elementary schools not connected to a high school, they cannot take advantage of the registration pathway. The second pathway is accreditation, which number one is, even if it's a process to get accredited, it could take quite a while. And even if schools start the accreditation process relatively soon, it will be challenging to have all the schools accredited before the deadline. And the one accreditation agency, which has customized their program to be reflective of the unique needs of Jewish religious schools, and it's actually the same accreditation agency that many of the Catholic schools use, currently is not acceptable to the state, something which we hope will change. The third pathway is assessments. Assessments could work, but there's, first of all, many of the common assessments used by yeshivas are not on the state list of approved assessments. And secondly, is there's very little clarity as to what that means. Is there what rate do the students have to take the assessments? What kind of grades do they need to get? How do you define improvements from year to year? There's a tremendous amount of ambiguity in those regulations when it comes to assessments.
So okay, so that's what else is in the new regulations that could be enacted and seems to be enacted that also the yeshivas don't like?
So there's two things. Number one is that each one, if they don't meet one of the three, they have to be assessed by the local school authority, by the local school district, whether New York City Department of Education or other areas of the local school board. So as Rabbi Pincus mentioned before, local school boards should not be the business of regulating yeshivas, and many of them are not equipped, frankly, neither they have the resources nor the capability of doing so. So they should not be ones evaluating, not only yeshivas, all private schools. By the way, the Catholics have a very big problem with this, and most of the boards themselves are opposed. The boards have not want to get involved. They have enough work to run their own public schools. They're not interested in regulating yeshivas. The second thing, which is probably most troubling, is the idea of appeals and complaints. Now we know in a legal matter you can't go to court. You can't go to court for a complaint unless you have a certain standing. You can't just go to court and say, I have no problem with something. The way these regulations are written, if a school gets a determination, even a registered school gets a determination that they're equivalent, anyone with an axe to grind, not a parent, not an alumnus, not a current parent of a student, anyone could say, call themselves an aggrieved party and put a complaint, could challenge a determination, and the local board would then have to open an investigation. That leaves the door open to any kind of, any agitator out there that could spend their whole life complaining against yeshivas and filing complaints. All they were doing is investigating mostly unfounded complaints. Even somebody without a legal standing that would be required to have a legal standing in a court of law. That is a very, very troubling aspect of these regulations.
Okay, and this cuts across, all religious groups. So are you working together with the Catholics to try to resolve this issue?
Absolutely, we are working hand in hand with them. They have been our partners at all of the meetings with the state education department as well as the town halls, and they will also be submitting comments, and they're encouraging their schools to submit comments as well, which reflect a lot of the same concerns.
And what is there? Are there other things that also bother you about the new regulations that could be going into effect?
So
I mean,
go
ahead, Rabbi Pincus.
The list of subjects. It says regulations say, math, English, science, social studies, physical education, and other subjects. And the statute refers to, or the regulations, I should say, refer to a different statute. Where if you go look at that statute, then there's a long list of 9 or 10 different subjects that have to be taught as well. Some of those subjects are fine and we support, and some of them we feel are just extraneous and unnecessary. A prime example
is they're extraneous and unnecessary, but that does not mean that it's harmful. In other words, from what I understand, part of the problem with government oversight of yeshivas and other parochial private schools is they can teach gender identity, the new cultural order, etc., critical race theory. So is that a concern in this situation?
Well, it's a concern down the road that once you have up and got the foot in the door, it doesn't mean they're saying it now, but in a year or 2, 3 years, those things may come down. That's why we don't want the state or the local schools running our schools, because again, they have a list of courses now. They may come back in a year or two, say we want to have course in gender identity and critical race theory and so on and so on. And some of those may be objectionable, will be objectionable, even though the current course may not be totally objectionable. But the bottom line is that yeshivas do a good job. We have the 3 yeshiva graduates here. Zev and I, we went. I could say Zev and I went to yeshiva together. At the same time.
But I do want to say, Rabbi Yeruchim, that the Hasidic yeshivas tend to have a different standard than the regular yeshiva. I think the yeshiva like we went to, Yeshiva Eastern Parkway or Torah Vadas, Torah Semes, they tend to have a little bit more secular studies than some of the Hasidic yeshivas.
Mm-hmm. They do. Well, the Hasidic yeshivas have been doing an excellent job educating the kids and preparing them for life. Education, not just a series of check marks, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a series of tests. It's really preparing the idea of education is to prepare a person to thrive in society, thrive in this world, and they're doing an excellent job. The Hasidic community is doing well, and besides, most of them earn a living, support their families. As we know, low crime rate, low drug use rate. So these are very productive members of society, and they are prepared. The schools prepare them. And don't forget, something we didn't mention is that the regulations don't give any credence at all to Limud Kodesh or Judaic studies. And as you know, Judaic studies is a serious academic pursuit. It teaches real critical thinking and other academics. It's not just, as we say, chanting prayers. It's a very, very serious study of academics, critical thinking, and people gain by that tremendous stuff. People that go learn Mishnayos and Gemara and Talmud, tremendous gain to their thinking skills, to their analytical skills.
And the best lawyers went through Gemara, went through
Talmud.
Sure.
And the state has not acknowledged at all the value of Judaic studies. And many of the Hasidic schools, they may have a little less secular studies, but they have a very strong Judaic studies, which really prepares them for to get through in life.
But the bottom line is what I'm gleaning. And by the way, those that are just tuning in, Rabbi Yeruchim Silber is Director of New York Government Relations of Good Israel of America. Rabbi Yehoshua Pincus, Director of Yeshiva Services of Good Israel of America. But the bottom line is that there is an aversion of government getting involved in religious issues. This doesn't only hold true for yeshiva education. Even the whole case of Mitzitza B'Peh with oral suction, The thinking is once government gets involved with one foot in the door widens to get involved in other areas. And I think that's the underlying theme that I'm hearing over here as well.
Absolutely. This opens the door for many other types of regulations that will affect schools, and you never know which administration is in power, who's in the SCD, who's in the local school boards, and it gives them the opportunity to continue to impose requirements whenever they feel like it.
So
right, governors and commissioners come and go. So this one, maybe another governor, another commissioner down the road, will they feel differently. And once, as you said, that foot's in the door, we never know what's maybe coming down the road.
So let me ask you a question. So are you concerned, you're concerned about this issue? Can't the governor stop it? And I would assume that Governor Kathy Hochul, or whether it's Tom Suozzi or a Republican, will probably be sympathetic to the issues of yeshivas.
Maybe sympathetic, but it's interesting that in New York State, as people may not know this, the one agency that does not report directly to the governor, every other agency directs, whether it's police or everything else, they report directly to the governor. Education the governor has no oversight over the education department. This is a thing called the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents is the oversight body over the state education department. And the Board of Regents are appointed by the state legislature, primarily by the assembly, because they're the largest body. So the governor has said positive things, but the bottom line is she really doesn't have an oversight in this to run. It does not come under her purview as other departments do. So it's really the Board of Regents.
If the governor is determined to do something, can't the governor do something about it?
I'll leave that to.
You're up in Albany all the time. I assume you have a relationship with Governor Kathy Hochul, or whether it was Congressman Tom Suozzi. Jumaane Williams, I don't think is a factor here, and I don't think he'll be sympathetic if he were to be elected governor. But you have a relationship both on the Democratic side and the Republican side, so that's why I'm wondering. Yes, they may have direct oversight.
We have spoken to the governor, and she says she's sympathetic. She's visited yeshivas, and we'll see where it goes.
So bottom line, people that are listening, how can they be helpful in getting this changed so there is no governmental oversight of yeshivas?
The tool we have right now is the 60-day comment period, which ends on May 31st. And as Rabbi Silber mentioned before, the 140,000 comments received last time made a tremendous impact. And we anticipate a large number of comments this time, which will also have a similar impact. So it's extremely important to every listener, first of all, go to voice.agudath.org and register your comment. We have form letters ready to go, or it's much better if you can write your own, and we have some background information to help you write that letter. And please encourage your family, encourage your friends, encourage your acquaintances to do the same thing. We have the numbers, our communities are, Baruch Hashem, very, very large, and we can mobilize a lot of comments. We just need to get everybody involved. It only takes
what you're saying basically is emails help in this case.
Absolutely. Take 30 seconds, go to voice.agudath.org, make a comment.
Well, I hope you'll keep us informed about it. But from where you're standing, it seems likely that they're looking to go ahead with it unless there's something's going to change it. Is that where we're standing at this moment in time?
Well, if they don't hear from us, then certainly they'll go along with what they propose. They need to hear from us that we're not acceptable, and then hopefully we'll come back to the negotiating table and negotiate something acceptable that we could all live with.
Rabbi Yeruchim Silber, Director of New York Government Relations for Good Israel America. Rabbi Yehoshua Pincus, Director of Yeshiva Services of Good Israel America. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for giving us some insight. And I urge people to get involved because, listen, this is a slippery slope theory, but certainly I understand that where once the door is open, things can change down the road as well. So we appreciate all your efforts.
And thank you for having us.
Thank you
so much, too.
Thanks for listening.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com. past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
just like you'll let us know what's going on tonight, so I could blast it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna run it tonight.
Okay, so we'll put us 8 o'clock, right?
8 o'clock tonight. Yes,
620, right?
620 and WVIP 93.5 FM.
620 and Talkline Communication, Talkline. What's the
Network.com.
So it's stream live.
3 live, exactly.
So we'll get out in our social. We'll blast it out there. Let people know about it.
Terrific. Okay, thank you so much, then.
All right,
Thank
Zev.
you.
Okay.
If you want to send me a picture of both of you, if you have a picture of both of you, send me a picture.
Yeah, probably. Okay, I'll send you my latest headshot. Okay,
I'll get that. Okay.
got it.
Terrific.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.